Regular scheduled meeting. Today is Monday, March the 27th, and the time is 5:30. And we want to welcome you to our meeting and call everything to order. And we normally have prayer, and we have a pledge of allegiance to the flag to start our meeting off. And I'm going to take care of the prayer this afternoon, and I'm going to ask that everyone in attendance to bow your heads in a moment of silence to show our respects to the 3 elementary school students and the 3 adults who were shot during another school shooting in Nashville, Kentucky, a place real close to us. So please, a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now be led in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I was going to ask Chief Tony Gray to lead us in that Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Gray? Very good timing. We'd like for you to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, sir. I told you to be here tonight. I had something special for you, right?
That's right now.
That's why you was late. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Good job, Chief. Commissioners, you've had the agenda since last Friday, and I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented, unless someone has some suggested additions or deletions. If not, can we approve the agenda by consensus tonight?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. The next item on our agenda, real briefly, is that we're going to hear from the public at this time. And at this time in our meeting, members from our community can come forward, identify themselves, use a microphone, and may speak to the commission about items on the agenda, only items on the agenda, and we ask that you take 3 minutes or less to present your item. And it's customary that during these commission meetings, we try not to respond back to your suggestions, but you are able to come and talk to us tonight about things on the agenda. Is there anyone in attendance desiring to speak to us about items on the agenda? Don't all of you? Yes, ma'am. Come forward, please, to the mic. Identify yourself, and we'll give you that 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jen Devine. I am a citizen of Danville, Kentucky. I just would like to invite you all, commissioners, mayor, everyone in attendance, everyone in the city of Danville. We are having a rally for our students and for the community on Wednesday night at Weisinger Park at 6 o'clock. That's this Wednesday, the 29th. And it's a rally for the laws that are going through the legislature right now that are affecting our LGBTQIA plus youth. So it's called Stand Up for Our Students. I do have flyers. I encourage you to attend. It would mean a lot to our children. We do have some speakers lined up from Center College, Bull Cunning High School, and Danville High School, and maybe even on the middle school level. So I do have some flyers here if anyone is interested. And yeah, I just wanted to offer an invitation to the whole community, and your support would mean everything.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, ma'am, we can, as they need to pick them up. Now, see, she was so excited about coming to speak to us, she didn't hear my announcement about speak to us about items that are only on the agenda.
Oh,
That's all right.
That's all right. Yeah.
I know you're a first timer, and you did good. So.
That's right.
All right. I've been there before, okay? Anyone else like to speak to the commission about items on our agenda? Well, hearing none, we'll move right along. So at this, next on our agenda is that we pay recognition to the Lady Admiral basketball team. I'm gonna read some of these things, but I don't have to read them all properly. The Danville High School Lady Admiral's 22-23 basketball season. Season record, 30 wins, and only 3 losses. Season record, new season record for Lady Admiral. Maybe new season record for you guys that have wins on the season. Okay? 11 wins and 0 losses in the 45th district. District champs. Wow. 45th district champs. 4 times in a row. So you're 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Wow. And then you were the 12th recent all-day classic champions. Then you made it to the quarterfinals. Of all Holy State too, you made it to the quarterfinals. So you won a couple of games in all-day state too. All-day state too. And then you made it to the finals of the 12th region tournament. Suffered third loss. Need about 61 seconds to pull that one out. Great year. Then you had 12th region player of the year, Love Ladies. You had 12th region coach of the year. He's been elected by the coaches. Coach Junior Mason. Now, this not on the list. Somebody correct me. Somebody was the district, 45th district player of the year. He looked like he was a somebody the 45th district coach of the year on this team. How many people died in this league? Okay, well, anyway, let's get a round of applause. Congratulations.
Go first, and then I'll duck down so everybody behind me can get a picture. Got it? Can we get
I want this young man, he's a tall and safe. Would you start us off by giving everybody your name, your rank, and your serial number?
I'm Brian Huffman, I'm one of the assistant coaches.
And your rank is you, what? You're enrolled in the MCSU, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir, all right. Yes, ma'am. Well, come on, man. You should outside. Pretend you're trying to get Coach Mason's attention. Hey, John, what's your last name? You didn't go to Taller when I was there, right? Because you know better to introduce yourself without giving saying your last
No, we
name.
don't need a mic.
All right, we'll try without the mic. Okay, you next. Come on, young lady.
I'm Mila Turner.
You who?
Mila Turner.
And your rank?
Oh, student.
You're 9th grade, 10th grade?
10th grader.
10th grader? All right.
I'm a 9th grader.
9th grader, right, okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Desiree Tandy, I'm a senior.
Let's see how she did that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Liv Mays and I'm a senior.
Quisenberry? And you're a what? Southland, okay. And where's the rest of the team?
They're playing other sports right
Oh, good answer.
We've got games
Okay.
and stuff right
Yes, sir, Mr. Ford.
So I'm Tyson Ford, I'm assistant coach and PE teacher at Danville High. Tyson Ford.
Yes, sir.
And I'm Chad Loman, the proud principal of these young ladies and this team and their accomplishments.
And I've met a 6th grader who played on the Bate Middle School 8th grade team this year. She's on the injury list, but, which one's your sister? always went up there, right? Okay, good. But as far as the city is concerned, we want to just congratulate you young ladies. I know there's some parents present, so you, parents and family members, you want to stand. We recognize you, give you a round of applause. You see what they just did to me? Okay, grandmama, you can stand, and grandmama, you can stand. Right? We'll give all of y'all a little small little biscuit to keep to the city. And it's the most valuable piece of jewelry you'll ever own in your life. I said, most expensive piece. Yeah. Who wants to take one of the first pieces? All right. And how many other girls are missing? No, sorry, no. We'll get one for all of these other girls who are missing. Okay. Will you all do that? Let's get some business with these folks, right? Oh, wait. Love ladies, raise your hand up, love ladies. So they know who's the senior in the 12th, 15th. Play every year, right? Knew how to play basketball. She is a singer. And she has been singing in churches and church choirs for a long time. But she also sings some of that other kind of music. I call it rock and roll, good old soul music. But what I wanted to call her out for tonight is that she's about knee-high to a grasshopper. Didn't have any front teeth, had a flat nose.
Tell it out.
Tell it all, where's mom? Mom, tell it all, right?
No, Mom.
But she taught us to sing the national anthem at a Lexington baseball game several years ago, right? And she passed the audition, so she sung probably the first or second year we had the Lexington baseball team to the Lexington. She was representing Harrisburg and Danville, all of Central Kentucky, but she sung the national anthem at the Lexington baseball game. I've always said, I helped her get into that point in her life. So let's give her a round of applause. And then she had the audacity just last week to turn down all these scholarship offers that I had presented for her. And she has signed a letter of intent to play at a D1 school that's not, I shouldn't say that, but is it, tell me who you signed with. UT Martin, right?
Yeah, good for you.
Who said that? Congratulations. So for a Danville High School young lady to sign a D1 scholarship, you are among the very small, very, ladies in our community. Congratulations. Tell your mama did all those bad things to you. That's okay. Okay, let's get to this. Come on, bro. Oh, wait. What's your own sweatshirt?
You guys getting really tight, and then you guys are gonna have to.
Little gal was sure giving him an evil eye. Yeah.
I'm just gonna go on. All right, ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, thank you.
All right, Chris, shall I get a picture? All right, thank you. Congratulations. Appreciate you guys. Great season.
He was giving him the evil eye, wasn't he?
Mr. Brian? Brian? You want to count out a number and bring those back to us? That expensive jewelry that you're packing around? Okay. Thank you all. And thank you all in attendance for being patient while we celebrate and recognize a great group of students. Okay, let's continue with our agenda. Item number 2 is that we're going to have a banner request from Kentucky School for the Deaf. I have down that Barbie Harris or Paula Mekas is going to do that. All right.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor, commissioners. I am the co-chair of the Kentucky School for the Deaf 200th celebration, which is a huge event this year. It's coming up soon, April 10th, 2023 through the 16th will be a week of events. And my counterpart here is going to explain what that schedule is going to look like, so I'm going to defer to her. The reason we're having the big event, of course, is because we have had 200 years of service from the Kentucky School for the Deaf, from 1823 until the present time. We are proud to have served the students of Kentucky for 200 years. April 10th, from 6 to 8:30, we're going to be providing light refreshments at the Jacobs Hall Museum on 2nd Street in Danville. On Thursday, April 13th, which will be open to the public, in front of Nancy Lee Hall, which is the big front lawn on Kentucky School on KSD's campus. There's an entire list of events happening throughout the day. We're going to be providing a reenactment of the establishment of KSD. We're going to also have a presentation about KSD during the Civil War. We're going to have a time of ABC storytelling that the students are going to be participating in. We're going to have a Kentucky history presentation as well as a KSD timeline. We'll be providing lunch. And then we're going to do a presentation of the past up until now, then and now, 1823 to present day. We're going to do a presentation of the banner. We're going to do what we're calling a historical slideshow, a birthday celebration, including cake. And then we're going to have, anyone in attendance is going to create the number 200 on that lawn, and then we're going to use a drone to take a photograph of it to commemorate it in the museum. And I'm going to let Barbie share a little bit more about the banner request. Monday, April 10th, during the opening celebration, as she mentioned, everyone is invited in the community to come to the museum free of charge. Take advantage of the opportunity. Of course, there are 3 levels that are in use right now. The 4th is under renovation. It's going to be amazing, truly just amazing things to see that even if you've been to the museum before, we have new exhibits. Everything is going to be captioned, and of course, because we'll have videos of a lot of historical stories, and it's very culturally rich as far as our deaf history for the last 200 years. And as we've spoken, it does include the Civil War, and many of you may not be aware that KSD was the first state-sponsored school for the deaf in the United States. There were 3 other deaf schools, but they were privately funded. So KSD is the first state-sponsored. During the Civil War, we actually had students stayed on campus while other schools closed for the war. Their parents were military personnel as well as nurses and doctors. KSD was actually a place of, we housed troops on campus during separate times for the North and South during the Civil War. Anytime the troops showed up, they had to, of course, house them. And that happened at least once where the troops showed up. They gathered all of the children and were going to make them leave campus, and then realized the students were deaf, so they decided to leave the campus alone. There were cattle nearby, and they did use those cattle. The troops did use those cattle to feed the troops, and of course they were looking for meat. Some of the students and staff ended up hiding some of them underground and were able to keep the kids fed during that time until the war was over. Once the war was over, there was a deaf teacher named Jeff Blant rode a horse to Perryville, where the battle was, and found, of course, lots of bodies in the area, rode back to the campus and requested from the president of the school that they needed to be buried. These bodies needed to be buried. So they utilized KSD students to go out to Perryville Battlefield, and they dug the graves for many of the deceased on Perryville Battlefield. So that's just one example of some of the historical things that you'll be able to hear about and see when you come to campus that week. As I mentioned, also, we're going to have lots of activities for the students during that week to expose them to their own culture and their own history. I can send you, commissioners, an entire list, the agenda for the week. I believe that it might have already been sent, so hopefully we'll be able to get as many people out to campus as possible. We're welcoming everyone to all of the events. The one thing, the open house on April 10th, we are requesting, Mayor Adkins, that we would ask that you would make a proclamation. And I can send that to you via email, but if you don't mind, to make a proclamation just announcing the opening week of the 200th celebration. Also, we have a banner, as I mentioned before. It's in the process of being made, and we would truly appreciate if the city would be willing to hang the banner outside City Hall. Okay.
Right, sure
Okay.
to do that. Someone already did that?
Because we already have the banner coming, so.
You all typically just approve it on the agenda.
They know the qualifications for it, requirements for it? Okay.
Yes.
Tell her yes, yeah, yes. And tell her yes to the proclamation.
Okay. We also have the banners that hang on the light poles. We requested last year that those be hung, and I believe we're working on those now. I saw that those banners have come in, so would those still be approved to hang for the month?
I think so, yeah. Tell her yes, yeah.
Okay. All right,
And
great.
Tell her I said thanks. It was a lot.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all very much.
All right.
Mayor, we typically take a vote on the banner request, so if
Okay.
you would entertain that motion, please, for the record.
Please. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the banner requests. Oh, I'm sorry. And the signage?
Yes.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the request from Kentucky School for the Deaf?
I make a motion to approve the banner request.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions or comments?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Could I ask Mr. Dexter a question real quick about this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to see if you could revisit the 2011 ordinance just to make sure it's in line with the federal guidelines. You know, in 2015, it looked like a couple items on the list were content-oriented, possibly. So it could be an issue later, maybe not.
No, precisely. It's made so we avoid that constitutional issue. Precisely. So this is not a sign. What you're referring to is a Supreme Court case that dictates what types of signage can be governed by the city of Danville. This is not a sign. This is on city of Danville property, and so you're entitled to determine what can and can't be hung. Yes, in fact, the city can limit it for charitable uses, so it doesn't become a public forum. But we can prevent and prohibit commercial usage of City Hall. That's a public right that you have.
Okay, that
It's
makes me feel better.
wholly separate
There's a
from what you're
couple
talking
areas
about.
that
Yes.
I wasn't sure of. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Holland, for your question. Any other comments? You heard that motion? Okay, next on our agenda is Board of Adjustments appointment. Commissioner, you have that in your packet. So would the chair entertain a motion?
Move that we approve Jim Brown to the Board of Adjustments.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments about the appointment?
He looks very qualified.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, all those in favor of this appointment of Mr. Brown to the Board of Adjustments, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and motion carries. Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes of the previous meetings of the commission. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of 3/9/23, special call meeting, 3/9/23 at 10 a.m., 3/13, the regular meeting, and 3/20/23, the special call workshop as presented.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Any corrections, additions to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, thank you for approving the minutes. Next item is zone change recommendation for Highway 2168 and Shakertown Road. Michaela? Oh, there you are. You moved on me. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. Yep, Planning Commission heard a request to approve a zoning map amendment at Highway 2168 and Shakertown Road. This particular application included 3 tracts of land. It was originally 1 tract. It got split into 3 kind of remainder tracts when Highway 2168 came through. 2 of them are adjoining the DCA on the southern side of 2168, and one of the remainder tracts is on the north side of 2168. The Planning and Zoning Commission met at their regularly scheduled meeting and unanimously approved the 2 tracts on the southern side of 2168 for approval for the zone change from ag to ICD. However, on the northern side, they did not recommend approval on that tract. Their motion was based on it not being in agreement with the comprehensive plan, but most of the discussions centered around the permitted uses within ICD and whether it was appropriate on the northern side of the bypass with the way our current comprehensive plan is written, and also just that there wasn't a conceptual plan or a general development plan, as we refer to it as, that seemed in line with what they were actually proposing to do. It showed supporting facilities for DCA, but as of now, there's no agreement with DCA. So that was what the conversation was around. Is there any questions for me on that?
Any questions or comments from the commission? And this is to approve 2 tracts of land on the south side of 2168.
Yep, well, that was the planning commission's recommendation, so you can either go with the planning commission recommendation or see as the commission sees fit. But
Any questions about this proposal from the commission?
And they had a conceptual plan for these two.
yeah, they submitted a conceptual plan for the 2
Right.
tracks on the
the
southern
south.
side. It was kind of included with what was submitted for the DCA tract. They're kind of showing expansion that would go into those 2 tracks adjoining. And then they showed a parking and kind of athletic type facility on the northern side, but then confirmed at
Right.
the meeting that that's not guarantee what they're going to do. They're not under contract talks with DCA, and so they're kind of just open to ideas to see what would happen. So,
Wow. So they were wanting to expand their campus to both sides of the highway? That's unusual.
so yeah, DCA is not associated. They've made it very clear, their attorney went on record that they're not associated with this application, even though their conceptual plan was showing that they were associated with the application. So they did say that there were preliminary talks for the 2 tracks on the southern side, but as of now, they weren't plans for future expansion on the northern side that they were aware of.
They own the land on the southern side, though.
They own 1 tract of land on the southern side, but the 3 tracts that we're talking about here are owned by First Southern Lending LLC. So not owned by DCA.
But it's been zoned for school activities.
Yep, so DCA was zoned agriculture, and I think it went through this commission a few months ago to get approved to go to ICD, which is a more appropriate zoning district
Yes.
for the existing school. And then at the same time this came through, it got tabled with further discussion, but the planning commission saw it appropriate to approve the ag to ICD for the 2 adjoining tracts on the southern side of 2168, but not the northern side.
That's interesting. Glad you all caught it, though, but that's interesting. Okay, commissioners, what's your pleasure? I'm sorry. Staff, you want to make any comments on this? Don't have any comments? Okay. So commissioners, is there a motion pending on approval or of this proposal?
I'll
So
move
just so the
Chicks.
commission's clear, you previously approved a zone change for Southern, for DCA, for where the school is located and 2 tracks adjoining the school, or track 2, that were owned or are owned by First Southern Funding.
Okay.
What is in question before you tonight is an adjoining, not an adjoining track, but one that is across the highway from the campus of DCA. So if you go through your packet, I think the best map that just shows where you are, I think is the 3rd one in question, 3rd and 4th one. So it does not show the school facilities on it. This is on the other side of the track. It took me a minute to orient myself because we had looked at this request before in acceptance on the southern part of 2168, but now this is the northern part of 2168. And you can see it's a long, skinny section that's just north of the roadway. There is some concept on the final map that I think Michaela made reference to. It looks just like, it says indoor athletic or indoor training facility and a roadway and parking, but you're saying that that was not, I'm confused about.
I guess I'm confused as well. I'm sorry. I didn't realize the 2 tracks had already been voted on that are adjoining. They are not owned by DCA. They're owned by First Southern. First Southern brought this application as one with the 2 adjoining tracks to the DCA lot and the northern tract to 2168. I missed a few city commission meetings, so I'm not sure if you all voted on it with the DCA, but DCA came through in December, and then we sent it through City Commission, and this one got tabled, so it was heard at a later date for further discussion, so. I don't mean to cause confusion, I
Well-
apologize.
Go to sheet 19 in your set, if y'all can navigate to there efficiently. There's an aerial image that shows the entire area as it sits today, including DCA's primary campus.
That's the aerial.
And tell me when you've gotten there. Do you see what I'm talking about, Stephen? So
I'm
then,
looking.
so then the DCA track, which is the one with the actual campus on it existing, is, you've considered that zone change and approved that. The one in question today are the ones with the 3 red dots, which
Yes.
was tabled at the initial meeting and then subsequently voted on. And what she's saying is that the 2 small tracks on the south side of the 2168, which is the side adjacent to DCA, that was approved for the zone change, is that right?
Yes, Planning Commission recommended approval for those 2 tracks on the southern side, but
And
not
then on the
northern
track
side.
on the northern side, which is the small slender track, that was not approved at this time, right?
Yep, recommended for approval.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So then in front of you today is, do you accept the recommendation on the 2 small tracks, aligning their zoning with that of the campus of DCA, even though they are not owned by DCA, they're owned by First Southern? And then also leaving alone, the recommendation is leaving alone the zoning on the north side, which is the sliver track, that is a remnant track left over from the highway construction that is also owned by First Southern. So DCA, other than just being a neighbor, has nothing to do with this application. There's 3 parcels owned by First Southern, 2 of which on the south side is recommended for zone change. The one on the north side is not.
Yes, thank
And
you,
as I
Earl.
look at
That
the-
was well summed up.
Okay, as I look at the map, the city clerk provided me a copy of what was passed previously, and I think part of the confusion is the fact that the same plats were attached to the prior zone change application, and First Southern was mentioned in those meeting minutes, but it does appear that you only approved the zone change for the approximately 24 acres that are owned, in fact, by DCA. So I'm on the same page now. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Thanks, Stephen. Any more questions for me after that?
Michaela.
Sorry, I know it's confusing. It took Planning Commission a little time to get their heads around.
I think you were clear in what you said. And what did you say the intended use of it was?
Based on the conceptual plan that was submitted, the 2 adjoining tracks are intended to help with the expansion of DCA, even though DCA is not currently under contract with it, but that is what the general development plan is showing. They will be held to that standard. If they decide to go ahead and change that, they will have to go through Planning Commission, a public hearing, to change that general development plan if they're not going to develop in that manner. But for the northern side, the engineer all but admitted that he essentially submitted a conceptual plan because it was required by me, that the owner didn't seem to have an understanding of really what they were going to do with that northern tract at this time. So I think that gave Planning Commission a little bit of hesitation for, going from an ag to ICD with no real intention of how it's going to develop at this time. So.
My only question, as I'm, again, gaining my bearings here, is it looks like on the conceptual plan, absent the testimony that you heard at your commission, it looks like it has some proposed or potentially proposed educational use that complements the DCA campus.
Yeah.
And if in fact, if it's a denial that is recommended and approved by the commission, then there's a prohibition of future usage. So my concern is, as a red flag, for at least for a 2-year period of a rezone, that would be prohibited in the event of a transaction. So if there's a contemplated transaction between the owner and DCA, then there could be a 2-year prohibition if the denial stays today, correct?
To purchase the lot or for the commission?
Or for
to
a zone
hear?
change, if it's,
Yeah, I wish I had the ordinance in front of me. I think I have the authority, or the Planning Commission has the authority to waive that time period if they so choose, but I would want to go back and verify before I
Okay.
tell you that,
okay. I mean, and if the
definitively.
testimony is not that there's a potential use or transaction between the parties. It's just, it's a bit unusual that you have such compiled graphics with separate applicants if there's not some proposed use in the future.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm being abundantly cautious, because, I mean, the ordinance says there's a 2-year prohibition from asking for another zone. I don't know if it can be administratively waived or not. Perhaps it can. But to me, it just raised more questions than it did answers when I reviewed the mapping.
Would it be appropriate to table this and ask P and Z to be
Well, the hearing's
more
been
specific?
concluded. The hearing's
Yeah.
been concluded, so they can't provide any additional information at the time. I think so. What's before you is really just whether, looking at the record that has been established, is whether or not you agree that the proposed use is in compliance with the comprehensive plan or not. P and Z recommends that it is in compliance with the 2 southern tracks, however, that it's not in compliance with the northern track. I was asking the questions to just have greater clarification of what was in the underlying record, because it seems like, based upon the graphics, that there was a combination, but she says that the testimony did not support that, which is the reason for the differentiation in what was recommended.
What zoning is, I don't know if my microphone's not dying, but what, the ICB? Describe,
ICD, yep.
Yeah, describe what's permitted in that.
The institutional campus district, so that's what Center College is zoned as and now what DCA is zoned as. It's really intended to be for campus-style development, whether it's healthcare facilities, schools, that type of thing, but it does allow for multifamily residential to the RM3 standard. There's some like daycare facilities, public uses, those types of things. I don't have a full list in front of me, but that is the intent of the zoning district. There was quite a bit of discussion about what uses would be appropriate, particularly on that northern side, but that's the basis of it.
So the question, I guess, is, so planning and zoning recommended that that track remain as ag in the short term, 24 months at minimum. So the question with the commission is, do you agree with that recommendation, or do you feel like that is, so you have 3 tracks there that, actually all of the land, DCA, and including those tracks, was originally a single track that was bisected and split up by the roadway construction. So you have a series of remnant tracks on either side of 2168 owned by First Southern, 2 of which are obvious, relationship-wise, serve DCA's campus well, so I can see why they would be interested in those, which is why probably the zone change is in front of you. The question is, do you agree that the northern track doesn't, that's not a fitting zone? The recommendation is that is not a fitting zone for the northern track. The question is, do you all agree with that recommendation?
Yeah, and I can give
Does
you a
that make
little.
sense?
Yeah, but instead of asking in the negative, let me say in the positive. The application is for an ICD zone change. So the true question is the proposed zone in compliance with the comprehensive plan? Is the northern, so the request is for 3 tracks. They found it to be in compliance on the 2 southern tracks, but not on the northern track. So again, the question is, what's difficult about some of these situations is that if DCA was the owner of this northern track, would you approve it? Would it be deemed appropriate? Which for me is more difficult, because you should consider these things absent ownership. It should be land use questions. Is it appropriate or not based upon the application that's been submitted?
And I think there were some questions about, the safety of using that northern tract for a school, just if you're having facilities that are going to require students to be going across the bypass and things like that. So I know initially in the first meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the actual conceptual plan and how we could safely utilize that tract if students were to be going back and forth along the bypass. So I just wanted to mention
And
that.
again, a lot of that to me personally is ancillary to the zone change application. They're considerations, but they're not the essential ones to discover, ultimately, is it appropriate or not, based upon the comprehensive plan? Absent ownership, absent those types of things. I'm sorry we're muddying the water so much. Usually we have quick discussions here, but this one seems to be more complicated than first blush review.
I'm going to make a motion, Mr. Dexter, if you don't mind, to approve the zone change as presented and recommended by the zoning commission, which approves the southern, I guess, tracks, but does not approve the change for the northern track.
I'll second that.
Probably moved in second. Any other comments or questions? I think the motion keeps the northern side of 2168 all edge at this point.
Yeah, I watched the
does,
meeting, and the meeting was very creative, and I thought they did a lot of good questioning and problem solving to come about this. So, you know, good job, because there was a big push for all three tracks, and the Planning Commission was very careful about what would be allowable on the north, and was very conservative, so that's my only comment.
And if the owner came back with the northern tract, they could have a conceptual plan that could potentially be, approved.
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to review the ordinance
Okay.
to make sure we can administratively waive
get
that
that
2-year requirement, but I think the intent would be for them to actually come up with an established plan for what it's to be
Right.
used for, and then we can appropriately decide if it's in agreement with the comprehensive plan or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chair would like to call for the question on this proposed zone change. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So motion carries. We approve the two on the south and not on the north. Thank
And
you
Mayor,
all.
for point of clarification,
Yes,
your
sir.
motion is taken as a direction to staff to prepare the ordinance that will
Yes.
be on for a first and second reading at your April meetings.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Item number 6. Historic District Overlay Amendment and Zoning Change. Joni House? Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor, Commissioners, the first thing I would like to do is thank Ms. Ashley Rader for helping me get this on the agenda. Thank you very much. And the Director of Planning and Zoning, Michaela Gary, for helping with this. Shall we continue?
Go right ahead.
Oftentimes, I come in front of this commission to add structures to the historic district overlay. Tonight, I am in front of you to request and follow up with planning and zoning's a recommendation that these 10 structures be taken off of the historic district overlay within the city. And the reason being, these are not historic structures. They never will be historic structures. Speedway is never going to be in a historic structure. It causes significant problems when we are trying to deal with signage in the historic districts. When you have non-contributing buildings and you have to hold them to these design guidelines, it's often problematic when you don't have, when they're not historic buildings. All of these buildings that are listed here are within the last 20 years or so. There's only one that was probably built in the 1940s that was a building. But none of these will ever be considered as historic, for the historic register nomination. None of them will ever be eligible for that because of the way they're outlaid. So we just want to make sure that the map is reflective of the current historic overlay district and that everyone's treated fairly within it, and the design guide apply for the buildings in there. So instead of asking you to put one on, I'm asking you to take 10 off. Any questions I can answer for you? And I would also like to say, Board, Gary Noble here is one of our board members that's here this evening. So, yay.
Well, the one question is that the property owners are in support of this, excited about this removal?
Yes, I believe so, yeah, yeah.
All right.
Well, so many of them, 90% of this is over signage and the way signage is attached to the buildings and whether they're a lighted sign or not a lighted sign. So I'm sure that since they don't have contributing buildings, I'm sure they're pretty happy about that.
Other questions from the commission?
Mayor, I think before you take any type of motion on this, we have some some review and discussion as the city manager's coming back. I'll delay a little bit more so he can get in the seat and help me out. I think what is before you today is reflective of an issue that there are some buildings that may or may not be contributing structures to the historic district. However, we have larger concerns with the district being set in spots such as, where takeout structures here, takeout structures there, and so you're going to have kind of an overlay district that is more not a block structure or some type of shape we can recognize, but carved in and out that's more reminiscent of some spot zoning. Staff would recommend a more comprehensive approach, that this be developed as an overview of what the overlay district should be, and perhaps it's not the historic overlay, but it's just a downtown overlay that has some set boundaries, and we can discuss things like signage, because again, these types of, they may not be contributing structures, however, they're neighbors to contributing structures, and perhaps the guidelines that are used in the case of a rebuild or something like that should still be compliant to some degree. So we would think it would not be appropriate to accept the recommendation to remove these structures from the overlay district, but in essence, refer it back to staff for a recommendation on how the district itself should be revised as a whole, and what are the appropriate boundaries, because I think most of us can agree 5th to 1st, Broadway to Walnut is the downtown district. And so what may or may not be appropriate outside of that could be different, and maybe historic structures have some elevated standards, but to remove them from the district seems somewhat short-sighted in that there's a larger issue at hand and at play. So staff's review of it is that you deny the recommendation and refer it to probably the city manager and whatever team he assembles to look at the overlay district as a whole and to offer a more comprehensive approach to the problem of signage, for instance, in the downtown district or signage in the historic district.
Yeah, the signage question was interesting, but then when you zoom out and look at it, so that it's a good description about that block, but in reality, the historic district covers the whole. We added KSD's campus years ago, and a vast majority of that's an empty field. So there's nothing historic to preserve, but what we care about is what gets built, and so that it fits in with the character and the adjacency. And so what Jim Walters indicated during the downtown master plan process is that it seems like we've not used architectural overlays with planning and zoning well. And it seems like that we should talk about that as a community. Well, this conversation kind of bleeds into that a little bit, which made it seem more complicated than at first blush for us. Obviously, these buildings that are there are newer. They're not necessarily historic. But at the same time, neither is an empty field. But yet, we're not removing that, but we're removing this simply because they have a sign request. So it seems like we're not doing the true administration of the boundary. It seems like we're just trying to fix this spot problem. And so, Joni's nodding her head. So what we would suggest is probably give us a couple of weeks, or Stephen, I don't know what your recommendation would be administratively, but I certainly could see Michaela and Joni and at least myself and probably Josh sitting down and talking about the boundary and coming back with what should actually be done comprehensively rather than just, in the same process, we're carving out a single parcel at the end of Main Street, the gas station. Well, that makes total sense. But what about the empty field down the street? So I don't know. It just seemed like a piecemeal tact.
But the larger question would be, if Speedway went away or a gas station went away and you're going to have a new business locate there, what should that look like? Right. If it's not in the historic district overlay, then there's no guidelines for it.
Right. That's correct.
So the question is, should there be? And that's a larger question than what's before you today. So if you're looking, Staff's recommendation, I believe, would be to deny the zone change request that is before you because it does not comply with the comprehensive approach. I hate using that word, with the
By
comprehensive
nature.
plan.
By nature of the document itself, of the boundary itself.
And so with instruction that a more, it be looked at in its entirety with a future recommendation to be brought back through the planning commission.
Well, and then related to this sign, you know, we have a downtown business that needs a sign. So at the same time, we would ask that you authorize the waiver of, what words?
Yeah, there's a design guideline that specifically prevents certain types of signage to be used, and we know that there's an application that has some of those elements in it. However, there are multiple signs that already have those in the historic district.
Including on the city's parking garage, for example.
So we would ask that also you waive that requirement for the pending sign application so they could be administratively approved pending resolution of this more comprehensive approach to the overlay district. I know there's a lot in there, but
Yeah,
one
that's heavy,
is we would recommend denial of the recommendation in front of you for lack of compliance with the comprehensive plan in respect of the historic district as a whole, and two, that you approve the waiver of the sign requirement for the pending applications due to the existence of other signs that have been allowed in the historic district.
The only thing I would add to that, that's a much larger conversation. Because we're a certified local government, the State Historic Preservation and the National Park Service will have to be involved. If you're going to put a redistricting overlay and look at the whole thing, for our certified local government, that's going to have to be a much more.
Sure.
Well, we talked about that a lot back last year. And so for Commissioner Sears and Commissioner Peak, this is a new conversation for you. But recall, we did talk briefly about the approval of the Main Street program, the historic district. So that this is right in that, this is part of that. So it's certainly.
Well, it's not a part of the.
No,
Main
no,
Street
it's
program.
part of the
Okay.
same conversation we had
Okay.
then. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And the other thing that we're getting ready to have another application for a lit sign on a historic building, which is clearly in the boundaries downtown. So my concern is if we're waiving this sign, you guys are going to probably see this again very soon because there'll be I'm sure there'll be an applicant that wants to do the same because we waived one now in the district.
Right.
I just want to bring that up to you.
So certainly, we don't want to recommend that the Architectural Review Heritage Board get overturned. But in this case, if the application for the sign, which we talked a little bit about it with Ms. Lester and you briefly, when it first came up, you know, this is one that certainly you would have to consider overturning that recommendation of this. So the sign in question, frankly, is across the street. It's on the Community Trust Bank property. You can tell on that property there's non-compliant signs already on the property, on the building, correct?
Correct.
And so it would be very difficult to stick with the recommendation that this sign not be allowed on that business with the parent track owner having a sign that's non-compliant.
Correct.
So we would be faced with the situation with staff that we'd have to recommend that we overturn or you go against that ruling. Maybe the other application, it might be different. I don't know that. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just bringing that up to you
Yeah.
because I know that will be part of this discussion as we
Right.
have.
Yeah. So that's a lot heavy. We weren't really, I mean, that's more than what it looked like on its surface, but it just feels that way. I know Joni and I have talked quite a bit about it initially when the sign application, and I know we didn't really want to be in a position to overturn or ask or even to judge whether or not that decision was.
I don't want to get the Architectural Review Board overturned again
Right.
on their design standards, which they are charged to uphold. There was
Right.
a great deal of discussion about this sign. It clearly doesn't fit within the district, but because it is an internally lit sign, it's against the design guidelines. So there's where we're having the issue at, especially on a or a non-historical building.
And so then that naturally lent to the discussion of, well, this doesn't belong in the historic district anyway.
Correct.
Which then, and they, led you to, well, these two properties down here don't either. And
Correct.
this, and then when I look at that, then what Stephen and I talked about was, that's, piecemealing some things together there. Maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe, and so our ask as staff is Joni has a recommendation in front of you. Our ask is probably, or our thought out loud is probably, should we look at it a little bit differently and really look at the total picture of what the boundary is, what it means, what it's supposed to be? Because like I said, how can you carve out one property and leave an empty field that has no structure on it? It's about architectural standards. It's about architectural overlays. So let's look at that with Michaela and Joni and try to come up with
I'm happy to.
an improved solution, an improved alternative. Yeah.
So the question about the zone change that's on the agenda for tonight, and I think staff is recommending that we not approve this.
Our recommendation is that you deny the recommendation based on lack of compliance with the comprehensive plan.
And then the issue about the sign go along with this, or is that
And that
another?
you approve or allow waiver of a sign requirement for an existing sign application. You can say as they exist today, that would prevent future applications, but, that's what we would ask.
And that waiver is connected to the property that's in this zoning change request?
It is, but already has non-compliant signs on the property and adjacent to it.
Yeah.
On not the parent track and other tracks owned by other people.
Jenny, you're our resident zoning expert. What are your thoughts?
I respect these two folks' opinion, and I think we should listen. I was super excited about the cleanup. Been waiting for it for 3 years. I know, working in planning and zoning, and even across the hall with Joni, how frustrating and frustrating it is to these businesses that are held to these high standards. It's very anti-business oriented. So I was really excited about the cleanup. If there's a big picture way to look at it, I'm open to rethinking some things. But I'd really like these businesses to win and have a different standard.
And Commissioner Holland, I think the frustrations that you felt too are felt at this table. And while I think if we're going to use an analogy here, this is like kind of sweeping one corner of the room, but what we're looking at is to sweep the entire room and clean it all, and not just in a piecemeal fashion, but a good scrub, because that truthfully has been needed for some time because of these inconsistencies that are throughout. And quite frankly, some of these applications, because of the what I would not call selective enforcement, but it's not uniform enforcement, would, under the law, put the city in a position where you can't defend them if they were challenged. So by virtue of that, I think we need to look at a total comprehensive cleaning of the overlay district and what that looks like. Perhaps it's not just historic, but it's a downtown standard that can be better for business and better for enforcement, and ultimately just clearer for property owners and business operators.
And to, there are many cities that do not govern, they have historic districts within their community, and they don't govern signage, because that's always a sticky wicket. What they govern is, how is that sign attached to the building? Is it going to cause permanent damage to that facade? And there are a great many places that look at it. This was a community standard that Danville put in when they did those design guidelines. But so there's many different ways to look at it. A lot of these are just specifically zoning issues, and they get completely out of the design or the sign business and let that be a zoning issue, and just specifically look at how that is attached to the building itself. So there's a lot of different ways. But again, that's going to be a much larger conversation with the Heritage Council, and I'm happy to share.
Yeah, and it's important to say what your point is, you're making too, is that to deal with the DHB, you're talking to the folks in Frankfurt. And one of the things we learned on our site visits, Commissioner Caudill, if you'll recall, we learned from several different cities that encouraged us to try to establish local control over your architectural standard, if you'll recall that. And, you know, so in the areas, the reason your businesses struggle is because they come to a community and they think that the local community is making the decision when it really circles back to it's a standard that's uniform through Frankfurt. So there's certainly worthwhile
Well, and the signage is not really a standard. Those are more local.
Local standard, right.
Those standards that are uniformed are more of a structural nature. Is this going to change the appearance of the structure itself? So signage is not necessarily that uniform standard unless you have a ghost sign or a painted sign that's been on a building for 100 years. You all have seen the old advertising signs. Those are because that is a historic preservation issue. But so many of the signage issues are just completely out of the architectural review boards because they're so problematic. And the only way they want to deal with it is it going to cause damage once it is attached to the building. But these are the design guidelines that we've inherited.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so to move this issue forward, I think staff is requesting that we deny the zone change, which allows time to clean up the whole district, and at the same time, approve a sign waiver that will take care of the customer, the citizen who brought this issue to the whole.
That's
planning and
correct.
zoning, right.
That's correct.
I second that.
Well,
Thank you for your motion.
Thank you.
All right. So it's been properly moved and second that we deny the zone change, but at the same time provide a waiver for the sign request.
Yes, sir. Well stated.
It's been properly moved and second. Any other discussion, comments?
We also are directing staff to come back with another recommendation in conjunction with.
Yeah, we'll schedule a meeting with Joni, Michaela, and Josh and just look at what to do and then come back fairly soon.
Okay, so a soon timeline.
Do you think we could meet and talk about a plan in 2 weeks, by April the 10th, or do you think we need to the end of the month?
I would think you needed the end of the month, personally.
Yeah, I would think that's probably more aligned with, so let's go to the second meeting in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move the motion forward. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hope that was, for those in attendance, we could get that cleared up for you. Wow. The next item on the agenda, wow, we just on number 7. Resolution 2023-03-2701, health insurance contracts approval. Mr. Boyd,
All right.
I'm not even going to say it. You know what I'm thinking, right? Let's go, Mr. Boyd.
Yeah. All right. So as a follow-up to staff's prior recommendation for our health care plans for 23-24 plan year, which goes into effect May the 1st. Just a couple of contracts that we need to have signed. One of those is with Aspirant, which is our third-party administrator for our medical plan, and then also our organ transplant rider with Tokyo Marine, which both of those plans exist now. All other health insurance plans will renew without additional contract terms. So we're just asking for approval for those two contracts to move forward with the plan for the new health plan year, beginning on May the 1st.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve these two contracts.
I'll move to approve Resolution 2023-03-2701.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other unreadiness, questions or comments? If not, chair call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Ashley Rader, ITS surplus. Thank you, ma'am.
These are just some IT items that we're going to surplus on Gov Deals. We're just asking you all to approve the list.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve resolution 2023-03-2702.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ashley, anything on that list you want to highlight?
It's not mine, but there's some laptops and some desktops and a few cameras,
Okay,
things like that.
thank you, ma'am. All those in favor of approving this ITS surplus, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
And this will be put out on the website, right? Or on Gov Deals, or so that the public can,
Yes, it'll be on Gov Deals. Okay.
Next item is Plan and Zoning Comp Plan Agreement. City Manager Kofi.
Thank you, Mayor Commissioners. You have a resolution in front of you, just for the public at large. So the city had previously discussed having the city's portion of the comp plan coordinated by KLC at a cost of $30,000. So this is a little bit cheaper. Michaela, would you mind coming up and explaining your process? I know that's putting you on the spot. I know you weren't really planning on talking about this, but I know you understand.
I stayed in case you all had some questions on this. Yeah, so we met with 3 different consultants, the mayor, Earl, the judge, county administrator, mayors of Paravel and Junction City as well. We are all involved in the process. We are looking to pursue a joint comprehensive plan. It seems like everyone's on board. So we met with the 3 consultants, heard all of their presentations. It seems like there was a consensus that the Bluegrass Area Development District provided the best cost, but also seemed to have a good plan set up for us with a sole staff person that would be focused purely on Danville-Boyle County Comprehensive Plan for 6 to 7 months, and they're hoping to finish the plan within that time frame. So that's where we're at now. The county did approve the contract and are ready to move forward, so we're just waiting on the city at this point. It will be funded just by Danville and Boyle County. Even though we are going to include Junction City and Paravel, we're not asking for funding from them. And Planning Commission has also preliminary approved negotiations. They just want to wait for you all to approve it, and they're prepared to approve it at the April Planning Commission meeting.
And we had previously set aside $30,000 for this.
Yep. I believe the cost is $48,725, if my memory serves me correctly. Sorry, I don't have the agreement in front of me.
Very good.
Okay.
And once, again, this will include the mapping, this price?
This does include the
Okay.
mapping, yes.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep, that was one thing about KLC. We were going to have to look elsewhere for mapping services, whether through the Bluegrass ad or elsewhere, so.
Thank you.
Well, I would move for approval of Resolution 2023-032703.
second.
Thank you all. Probably moved in second. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I just wanted to point out that the cost is shared, $24,000 and $24,000 with the county, just so the taxpayers know. And I appreciate the great collaborative effort, you guys.
Thank you, ma'am. All those in favor of passing Resolution 03, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Coffey, City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Commissioners. We would like to point out some important dates and some disruptions real quick. Of course, the budget meeting, the 31st, is at 10, where we'll get into the year-end numbers. April 10th is a regular meeting. April 14th is another budget meeting. That's the 3rd budget meeting with KLC. That's where they will present their draft plan from the commission's perspective. 18th is another budget meeting for the department heads. The 24th is a regular commission meeting. And the 28th is, in April, is the budget meeting where we'll try our efforts to present a draft operating budget on the operating side. Downtown Streetscape, we've discussed it ad nauseum earlier. City Hall closure, half day, April the 7th for Good Friday. Spring break is the 3rd through the 7th. We want to acknowledge that, so we don't have a budget meeting that week. Future agenda meetings, we still have to deal with the codes, food truck ordinance. That should have been up towards the top. We actually have that done, but we didn't make it for this agenda. The audit for 21 is done and complete. We anticipate that presentation being, making the agenda on the 10th. We want to let you know that we're going to do an RFP for auditing services to identify, let this commission choose the auditing firm. Also, we'll do an RFP for financial advisory services. So as we get into the next budget cycle, then we have both hired our new auditor and our new financial advisor. And it could be the same, but we want that to be your all's choice. The February budget update is attached. You have a lot of numbers there, and we know the public can't see them. The quarterly budget report's one we usually have for the screen. We want to give this to you guys for your sake. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. The trends for the city overall, the summary of all funds, which is page 5 at the bottom, we are positive variance of $2 million on our operating revenue citywide. And also then in terms of expenditures, we're a negative on our expenditures, meaning we're a little bit over what our original budget was by $18,000. And so we're ahead on revenues by $2 million, and we're pretty much flat on our operating expenditures. Capital influences our cash reserve. So you'll skip forward to sheet 7, which is a better scenario because the sheet 6 has all funds and has capital included. So rather than trying to break that down, we'll take you to sheet 7. That is a snapshot on each individual month of operating revenue versus operating expenses and overlaid with your operating bank balance. And so the July, you have, that's the first month of the cycle where our revenues come in a little slower. Think when our taxes start rolling in the second quarter, really. Your operating expenses are higher that month. That's the only month you have operated in a deficit. Operating revenues have exceeded operating expenses in every month thereafter by a pretty good amount. We began the year in our operating account considering the capital work that we've had ongoing with about $8.4 million in the clearing fund account. And today we have roughly $7 million, 6.9 in our clearing fund account. Now that does, some of those has been transferred to other funds, and so it's not just, but we wanted to make sure you understood the clearing fund balance. There's another chart that is towards the back you can spend some time with, which is your net operating reconciliation, but that's a similar graph that the one you had, I guess, with cash flow. You have your bank accounts in the very last page. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. There's a lot of information there, and certainly we're not going to try to ask you to cite it tonight. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments?
Excuse me, Mayor, but Earl, I thought you was gonna talk about Bellevue and the flag situation.
I appreciate you saying that. I did not do that. I forgot. That was on me. So we had an incident last week where some of the veterans' American flags seemed to disappear out of the cemetery. Upon being made aware of it, we looked into it. So our mowing crews this time of year had removed the ones that are frayed or that don't look good. The other ones, they press, closer to the stones and move as they mow and trim and whatnot. So we did solve that mystery. And so by policy, what we did was we tried to establish what does Camp Nelson do in the National Cemetery portion. And it seems like they align the management of those flags in the same way we were, which is to say that when they're put out, they leave them out, usually, at least 7 or 8 days. When they start looking bad or faded, then they remove them. They try not to have those flags that are faded. And I think that's a fair assessment of what their policy was. Ours, I think in the wintertime, we've allowed them to sit out there a little bit longer, which is why there was a mass removal, which is why it was alarming. And I think that was my takeaway after I talked to staff, because they had, we had tended to leave them out there through the winter after Veterans Day in November. And so whether or not that's reasonable or not, I don't necessarily know that that's really the best tact. Maybe we should look at that more frequently. And so we will work with our staff internally to make sure it aligns with the methodology Camp Nelson generally applies. And so if you don't find any conflict with that, but what we wanted to do is make sure we affirm for you what our idea was tied to those flags, let you know the conclusion of what we discovered when it was immediately raised to our attention. It wasn't something that there was some nefarious or just negligence of care. It was just simply that we removed the ones that were frayed after the winter. Is that what you remembered? Did I cover everything that you wanted?
Partially accurate. If you don't, can I have a couple?
Absolutely.
Discuss this?
Yeah, I was distracted by the other subject.
I've been up, I'm Jack Henry, by the way.
What's your name?
Jack Henry.
Oh, I'm
You know
sorry.
that fella. The guy that's pest you all the time. Partially, that is accurate, but part of it is not necessarily accurate. And I know you got a lot on your plate, and it's hard to have flags in Bellevue as maybe one of your priorities. But I think we need to establish something that we're going to do about flag removal and that sort of thing, because first of all, we can't leave that up to the mowing people or the contractors, and that's what we've done 2 years in a row. If you remember last year, we had a discussion and we brought pictures, and flags had been run over by the mowers and just left laying on the ground. People went through and picked them up. My big question is this time, nobody in your office or nobody at City Hall knew about this until you got some complaints. Mainly I got them and then I passed them on to you. And I appreciate you jumping on it right away. But nobody knew this was happening. We're leaving this up to people that are hired to mow in our cemetery, and that shouldn't happen. First of all, my question is, what happened to all those flags? There was probably 30 to 50 flags. Now, where did they go? Did they just throw them in the back of the dump truck and take them to the dumpster? Or what happened to them? If they did, you and I both know, and everybody in here knows, that's not the proper way to dispose of flags.
Yeah.
And we fought that, me being a member of the VFW and American Legion in town, we fought this for years to get people to bring flags to us, and we would dispose of them properly. And then something like this happens, we don't know what happened to them. Now, partially what you were saying, I know you ain't got time to go check, but I did. All the flags, I went through the cemetery yesterday. All the flags were removed with the exception of 4. 2 of them were on the flower arrangement on top, so I understand why they didn't get those. 1 was in a little flower bed that's made in front of the stone, so they don't get mowing up close to that anyway. But then the 4th one, that supposedly we went through and got all the fragrance, is this. Now, obviously, everybody can make a mistake. But how can you pass that up if you're picking up all the ones that are frayed and faded and shouldn't be there? Now, totally, this should have been removed months ago. We all see that. And I think you need to sit down and have some discussion with maybe a cemetery committee, you, maybe a couple of veterans organizations should be involved. But something needs to be established as to what we're going to do with all these flags, because the people that come out there and put these flags up for their loved ones do it for a reason. It's not necessarily because it's Memorial Day or Veterans Day or whatever. They may have other reasons. So to say we're going to just go through and take them all up all at one time, that may work for Camp Nelson. But as you saw by the emails, and I forwarded it to all of you, Camp Nelson doesn't have a real strong protocol as to what they do. The biggest thing that I gathered from Mike is the director at Camp Nelson. The biggest thing I gathered from him is he feels like that most of these little flags like this that are bought mostly at Walmart and places like that, as was in the email, they last about a week when there's a rain. The colors fade, the red fades into white. So he says a week to 2 weeks is a maximum we should leave these flags out. So we could possibly, if we could get a general consensus, I don't want to be the person to make the rules. That's up to you all. But you should do it with some compassion and with some help from the people that know what we should be doing with these. If you wanted to make a rule that 2 weeks after Veterans Day, or 2 weeks after Memorial Day or any other holiday, we go through and remove all the flags so everybody understands that, the public and the people agree to it, then I think that's fine, if that's what you want to do. But we need to have something that this doesn't happen again. You know, I've had to come up 3 different times in the last 15 years on 3 happenings that shouldn't have happened, and every time, this is the 3rd one, every time we've been able to resolve it in a good manner. You know, the first time was with the stones that got destroyed, and the second time was with last year with the flags that got run over. I'm sure we can fix this, but you might, if you need help, I'll volunteer to help. That's not a problem. I'm sure we got other people that will. The cemetery committee ought to be involved. Commission ought to be, everybody ought to be on the same page as to what we're going to do. And Camp Nelson is a good protocol, but they really don't have a strong one either. So we might need to make our own. As a general rule, Mike's people at the National Cemetery will put that flags out, and they stay out about a week. They're put out by veterans, by Boy Scouts, and all that on every stone. And then they come through a week to 2 weeks later, and they take them all out at the same time. That's pretty much their protocol. They don't wait for them to get like this, and we shouldn't either. And I don't think any citizen is going to complain if we keep this type thing from happening. Some people, they put a flag on and they just forget it.
Yeah, I agree with you. The cemetery section probably should have had responsibility for the flags to begin with. So one of the things we'll do tomorrow is meet with our cemetery sexton and our city engineer and public works director. And
everybody's thinking on the same page.
We
Let's
are.
just fix the problem.
We are.
You know, that's all we need to do. Nobody wants this.
And we'll ask, the one question that lingers is whether or not you allow a family coming in from somewhere at a random day to put a flag out. So when you're talking about around, Memorial Day for 2 weeks, that captures those. But if somebody comes in August at a birthday and let them sit out there 2 weeks. So let me run that through the cemetery committee. We'll let the cemetery section and those folks discuss it with them, and we'll have an administrative policy. We'll report that back as a follow-up item to the commission, also at the end of April. That'll probably give us enough time to meet a couple times if we need to. I don't know what the schedule is for the cemetery committee, but that's an administrative thing, and certainly that's something that we should have our cemetery section responsible for. But the one piece of advice I would like to hear some feedback on is whether or not you allow, I know, my family cemetery, we have flags up there on our own, on birthdays. So something to consider, and so we'll look at that together.
You know, it's another thing too, when they go through mowing, I've been over there and saw them going through mowing, there's always usually somebody that walks down between all the stones and picks up tree limbs, because we've got so many of them.
Yeah.
You know,
It should not be the mowing contractor. It should be the cemetery section responsible for the flags. And we do agree that proper disposal is 110% necessary. And certainly that's something you all do, and I think we even helped you with that last week. So
Yes,
we'll
you did.
we'll
Let me thank
We'll do
both
that.
of you all for your input, your discussion. It's been recommended by staff to take this to a committee. Jack, as always, I want to thank you for bringing these types of things to our concerns, and from one veteran to another veteran. I appreciate your interest and your service. Next on our agenda is we hear the public.
Can I ask a question of the city manager real quick?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We had an update on Streetscape, appreciate that. Can you give us any update on signage?
Josh left me, and he was the one working on
Okay.
that. So let me make a note of that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
We gotten sidetracked. Yep, not sidetracked, that's an important discussion, but are there other items or questions for the city manager? We're moving to the part of our agenda where we hear from the public. I'm going to invite the Greenhouse 17 representatives to come up to the microphone and do a brief presentation to us. Thank you all for waiting patiently. They had requested about being on our agenda, and we somehow got the communications.
So thank you all very much for squeezing me in. I'll try not to take too much time. I'm Darlene Thomas. I'm the executive director of Greenhouse 17. Greenhouse 17 is your domestic violence program that serves the 17 counties in central Kentucky. So we cover the entire Bluegrass Area Development District. I have with me this evening, I have Steve Lowndes, who's our board chair from Danville Center College, and Shannon Weir, who will be the new coordinator of the program I'm getting ready to share with you that we're bringing to the community. We've always been a part. When we first were formed in 2005, we provided services in Danville for many years. The city of Danville provided some support. The county provided support. And then once we really kind of stabilized and were able to be on our own as a private nonprofit, we stopped asking for local dollars. I am back. I'm back because it's an exciting new project and program that we've worked closely with the United Way. Heart of Kentucky United Way has always been a supporter of Greenhouse 17, and they helped put together a collaborative effort of community leaders throughout the four-county area, which brought to light a very much needed service that did not exist for domestic violence survivors and their children, and that is visitation and exchange services, supervised visitation and exchange services to become local. So with that task in mind, we explored the possibilities. We worked with Grace Church. Grace Church, which is located in Danville, will be the site of our visitation and exchange service. They have the perfect facility. They have done in-kind to the facility, plus raised money for toys and goods and the security that's required for a program such as this. We've worked with local foundations to secure other money to be able to ensure we have all the security necessary. I have been meeting with the four communities that will be served, or the four counties, will be Boyle, Mercer, Lincoln, and Garrett. That'll be kind of the quadrant of individuals. So I'm going to each county with a request of funding that will probably be the next few years. So it will be repetitive until we're able to continue to work on other grants that will cover those costs eventually. The only thing we're asking from the communities, each county, is $14,350. That is it. I have talked to your fiscal court here, which I felt was very supportive. Don't mean to speak for them, but it was very well received. And when I'm telling each community is that's what I need from every county. The four counties, we need the $14,350. If the city would like to split that with the county, that is wonderful. And we'll be doing the same for Harrodsburg and each county and each city for those counties to let them figure out how they would help fund this service. I have 65% of the money raised, which means I can cover the full-time employee with all benefits. What I'm asking the communities to do are two things: help us pay for the monitors. So we have to have monitors. So a visitation and exchange service includes 6 rooms. When a visiting parent shows up to visit with the child ordered by the court, this is very much supported by Judge Petrie and all the family court judges in the 4 counties. As a needed service, desperately needed service. If Judge were here tonight, I think he would share that with you. The visiting parent would come, is on site. We have to have a monitor that's trained, that watches the entire hour that they are in supervision with their children, right? So they're visiting with their children. It has to be monitored and documented back for the court during that time. So we are able, because of this facility with Grace Church, and we're very grateful for all they've done, to have up to 6 rooms each evening. We're going to try to run 2 evenings a week once we're able to get it off the ground. And that will provide about 36 visits a week, which is a great many families served during that time. And then we'll grow from there. We'll see what happens in expansion. We'll adjust cost as needed throughout. This is core. It pays for monitors. And then I've also talked to every chief of police of the respective cities to offer the potential for law enforcement to be on site as a security means, and they could do it as off-duty work. So I have met with your chief locally to make sure that chiefs will approve their officers to be on site. We have to have an officer to make sure that we keep all things calm. These are escalated families. We know they're at greater risk. They are usually through our protective order system, where judges have had to grant protective orders, and or there might be pending criminal charges. And in the meantime, the courts need to find a safe place that's not Walmart, for people to visit and not family members, which we know also escalates the risk to more than one person if anybody decides to do harm. So we look long and hard. We believe this is a wonderful service to bring the community. We're excited to do it. We've been here all the while doing, coming to court and doing support groups and being engaged in the community. It's just a way to expand the service as deemed necessary by the communities themselves. Do you all have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. And Commission FYI, they're going to go through the funding request process.
Okay.
Okay?
And we have submitted that,
Yes.
but we also didn't want you thrown off guard, not even understanding
Yes.
or have an opportunity to really ask questions about what it looks like if you have questions.
It's a great idea. Thank you very much.
Thank
Well,
you.
Great potential and great need for our community, so that's a great service. So I want to thank you in advance. I look forward to working with you in some capacity.
Thank you very
right.
much. If I can answer anything, I do have these little sheets if you'd like those, although they'll be a part of the main packet, and it might be helpful.
I like them.
You all just kind of be able to see and review it for yourself.
I got mine. Yep.
What this will
Thank you.
kind of look like, who
Thank
our
you.
partners are, how we're able to get it together. But if there's no questions, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the
Thank you, ma'am.
information.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Next on our agenda is Commission, I'm sorry. Is there anyone else from the public that'd like to speak to the commission about items not on the agenda? Yes, ma'am. You want to go first, and then I'll let you go next, young lady. I'm gonna slip up. Please identify yourself, ma'am, and we'll give you 3 minutes or less to present to us.
I'm Kathy Preston. I live on Boffman Avenue. Me and 5 others have changed the original owners of the old homesteads on the far end by Ghost Pike. They've changed hands, so we're all new owners and stuff. And we have a lot of concern with the trash that goes up and down Boffman Avenue there, especially towards that end, and Ghost Pike, where the city dump is. People come by hauling their trash, but it's never secure. And I have just a few pictures right now
Okay?
that are laying
Thank
out
you.
there as I speak. And it just is terrible looking. And even one of those is a dog box. I mean, it was out there halfway in the road, and when you come over the hills, and we know how dangerous those roads can be on that end of Boffman and Ghost Pike. So, and the last one is a huge pothole at the very end of Boffman teeing to Ghost Pike. And Ghost Pike itself is a narrow and dangerous and very busy traveled and a lot of high speed goes up and down there. But the edges of the roads are cracking and falling off. The road itself, there's a culvert or something the whole road is sunk on Ghost Pike. That particular pothole, it's like a foot deep, and they come and put some gravel in it, but within a week or two, it just is back gone again instead of fixing it correctly. So, yeah, the trash, and I've seen them. I've lived there going on 3 years now. I bought one of the old homesteads, and I've seen the city dump have an employee go the best they could considering the danger of that road. One time during the year to pick up trash, one person, best they could. But I mean, there are big debris out there a lot of times. And it's just awful. The trees and stuff, once they turn green, it hides some of it, but throughout the rest of the year and everything, it's just absolutely awful. And like I said, so many large things fall off and it makes it dangerous. So those are the two concerns, the bad construction, the danger of the road itself and the edges falling off and stuff there going down Ghost Pike and it's like a highway across there. And all the trash. Secondly, I would like to ask, did the sidewalks ever get approved to go down Boffman Avenue? Was there ever a?
Ma'am, I'm afraid I don't have an update. The city engineer is managing that. and he didn't, I don't know,
I know there was a meeting and
And
I
improve.
was working, so
Yeah,
I wasn't
I-
able to come to it. So.
we'll have to report back to you.
Okay. Well, I had called and inquired and nobody called me back. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I am Teresa McGee, the regent for the St. Asaph chapter in Danville for the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. I'm not here to ask for money. I'm here to invite you to a special program. On May the 11th, May is Historic Preservation Month. We at the Arts Center, DAR, will have an evening meeting. We're going to have a special speaker, Mel Hankla. For you all that have never heard of Mr. Hankla, he is quite well known in Kentucky. He will speak to us for about 45 minutes. And I have an invitation for each of you all and some extras to lay on the table for others that might want to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And thanks for the invitation.
You're actually going to give me one?
He said, yeah, but he'll have to bring us.
Uh-oh. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Is there anyone else desiring to speak to the commission? Yes, sir. Mr. Hendricks?
I won't take too much time, Mayor, thank you.
All right.
Sure. Sure. First of all, I didn't get to think a minute ago. I want to thank Earl and Marshall. They came down to VFW. We had a backlog of flags and helped us do the proper thing with them. We had probably 300 to 400 that, because of our roof blowing off, and the American Legion had theirs. And we brought them all to one place and got it okayed by the Department of Defense to bury them.
Wow.
So Earl sent Marshall down with a couple of guys. They, excuse me, dug us a hole and we put them all in there and done it respectfully and had a little ceremony. So I want to thank Earl and Marshall for that. Those pictures there are a result of this. Y'all seen that when I come in. And Earl's helped me with this too. I've called in and talked to him. He's got me some numbers. And I finally did get a hold of after a week and a half, the project manager of the Streetscape, I guess is what it's called. I'll be polite. In front of the courthouse, there's approximately 100 feet, and you'll see it in those pictures, that's not marked off. There's no warnings. There's nothing. And there's a 2-inch drop-off where they're going to inlay brick. I've heard that there's 2 other falls up there, plus mine, that's got a broken foot because of it. And if you look at those pictures, you can see walking from the memorial. I was up there putting up a couple of new flags at the memorial in front of the courthouse. Walking back from the memorial, all the concrete blends together. There's approximately 10 feet of concrete, and then a 2-inch drop-off and 4 to 5 more feet of concrete, and then the curb. If you're not extremely careful and you're not looking straight down, you're not going to see that 2-inch. Because looking out ahead, it all blends together. So I mentioned it to Earl, and he was going to get the contractor to do something, and I think finally, this happened on March the 5th, and I've been raising Cain about it since. Today, I came through, and it looked like the conversation I had with him today, because I told him if he didn't want to talk to me, he could talk to my lawyers. That's not a threat, that's just a fact. But he was very argumentative, didn't really satisfy anything, but I did see when I came through town that, by golly, they've got it all marked off now. So there were cones and barrels and everything else highlighting it, so that my main concern is someone else falling. And if I hadn't been able to, I was trained years ago, and as Commissioner or Mayor Atkins knows, in the military you get trained how to fall. and you do a controlled fall. I kept from falling on my hip. I'm 82 years old. I could have broke it real easily, but I knew how to fall. It did break my foot, elbow, shoulder, arm, knees, but other than that, I'm okay. I just don't want anybody else to fall, and I wanted to bring it to your all's attention that this contractor is not doing everything he can do to protect the citizens. And there's, in front of the courthouse there, I know what they're doing. They're leaving about 6 or 7 parking places open for nighttime people that want to go down to the restaurants. I understand that. But, you know, people falling and breaking things is not the answer to fix it. So thank you very much. I just wanted to bring it up and let you know.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Thank you, Jack. Commissioner comments? It's, whoa, almost 7:30, I'm sorry. Commissioner comments?
I just wanted to talk about the therapy dog, I think, that went to Danville Schools, the new canine. Is his name Scooter? Right. And Officer Ray that were out there. I think the kids really enjoyed the seeing the dog and getting to interact with the officers and the dog. So.
Anyone else?
Kind of along the question Rick had about the wayfinding signs. I took a drive to Harrodsburg, and then I took a drive to Bergen. And I know Josh is real busy. I hope he can appoint someone to finish up the signage. They had kind of matching signs, a little B, and then it said Bergen. But if that style's approved, I hope we can just see what's approvable and get things moving. And then the other thing, I've heard lots of thank yous with the Regional Economic Development Summit. So thank you to City Manager and Ashley and the whole team in Intercounty. Everybody really got a lot out of it, so thank you.
April begins this Saturday in spring break, but also downtown Downbeat starts next Thursday. So despite the construction and everything else, life will go on. We'll have some music. Should be at Constitution Square and over here at Wisinger Park. And I may leave Hospitality 101 over to you, Mayor.
What's that?
Talk about Hospitality 101.
Oh, I think he's coming, well, I attended Hospitality 101 from 12 to 3 today. Very informative about customer service. And what was impressive to me, I only got to see 2 businesses present, but they presented all the good stuff about their company and how they wanted the front desk people in our city and county and throughout our community to receive and answer questions to guests coming to our town. We attended the ribbon cutting for Los Margaritas this afternoon. That was very festive, and there's about 100 of us out on the sidewalk going down South 3rd Street, right? Yeah. Is that right? 4th Street. Anyway, and then I didn't want to say this, though. Well, Chief Gray, stand up back there. You get lots of recognition for a job well done, but Chief Gray back there has highlighted in the newspaper. He was on the Boys Sweet 16 championship officiating team for the 6th time. And that's really impressive for a guy who has only been officiating for about 3 years now. But, you know, he's been around in the sports world for a long time, and to be on the squad that does the Sweet 16 boys. You've done some girls as well, though, haven't you? So it's really impressive to have a celebrity amongst us, but congratulations, Chief, 6 times. That's really neat. Okay. Any other comments from the commission?
Nope, just don't forget the Easter egg hunt. Bring the kids to Millennium Park April 8th. Parks and Rec and churches are doing it.
You told me I was too old to hunt the eggs, but I might show up.
Only
Okay.
pre-K through 5th grade, JH.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Okay, let's move right along. Any other commissioner comments? If not, payment of the bills? Chair entertain a motion to pay the bills?
I'll make a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $372,766.92.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments about the bills list?
What was the structure at Millennium for 109,000? The shade structure?
Those are the sunshades at the softball complex that was ordered a long time ago.
They were ordered April-ish of last
Okay,
year.
Yeah.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Which is why no one remembers the
No,
purchase,
it
but
was
they-
like 2 years
They were
ago.
ordered quite a while ago, yeah.
That will be
So if
so
you go
helpful.
out, they're so helpful with those of
Okay.
us that have been out there, that have had kids. I mean, that really, the shades matter. Just like good officiating, having a daughter that just graduated, I went to that game, and Chief Gray did a good job. I give him credit, that was a good crew that game.
And it's also important because there's a lot of tournaments every weekend.
Yeah.
And so it's not just for our community, but helps that.
Thank you, ma'am. All those in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you all. Item number 12, Resolution 2023-03-2704, an easement acquisition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Carrier?
This is the first of two easement acquisitions for utility easements along the vicinity of Ghost Pike for future construction of 15-inch sanitary sewer, gravity lines, and appurtenances.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2023-03-2704.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments to Mr. Carey about this resolution? Hearing none, the chair calls for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Mr. Carey, you have the next one, 05.
Thank you, sir. This is a similar situation, another acquisition of utility easements in the vicinity of Ghost Pike for the future construction of 15-inch sanitary sewer, gravity lines, and appurtenances. Same project.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-03-2706.
Second.
Okay, we're on 05, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Any questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of approval? 05?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you. 06, Mr. Carrier, is yours again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city received two bids in response to a proposal that the city put out for what's called granular activated carbon contactor media removal. It's essentially a filter media for the water plant. We had three bids. One was for $189,500. The second was for $202,526. And just two bids. And we're seeking approval for the low bid of $189,500. This is to remove and transport offsite to a different facility for treating the granular activated carbon, which is used to filter the water, improve taste and odor, and remove any kind of regulated compounds out of the water. This is something that we do annually.
Thank
They
you, sir.
recycle that, Marshall?
Yes.
They clean it
Yeah, they
and
take it
recycle
off-site and then thermally treat it, heat it to really high temperatures. It burns off all the excess residue and some of the organic compounds that have tied themselves to the carbon, and then bring that it's called recharging it, but bringing the carbon back to the facility and putting it back into the filters.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2023-03-2706.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, chair call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. 06 passes. Mr. Carrier, 07.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all are probably aware, The municipal utilities are currently in the process of finalizing some new billing software, along with finance as well, to help not only streamline some of the processes that we have here with the city, but also improve customer service. This is certainly a part of that customer service aspect. Part of this proposal is a web portal proposal, which will allow the customer to have an online account, but also provide some additional benefits to the customer, such as paperless billing, online payment options, paying by text, bill reminders via text, late notices via text, have their own customer dashboard they can go to and review their billing notices in the history of their billing. And then also relieve the city from some of the undue needs of manual billing entries. You know, you have a lot of human error sometimes when you have a lot of manual entries through personnel that have to do it by hand multiple times on the same bill. With modern technology, we shouldn't have to do that. So, and then single point of integration for some of our billing software. So that's what this is about.
Okay.
And there's a sheet further into the proposal that breaks that down, some of the benefits to the utility customers and then benefits to the city. All things are good.
Okay. Anything else you want to share about that? Is there a cost?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were waiting on a comment. Well, if you look through the proposal, there's fees paid by the city. So there's a breakdown, there's a fee chart in your proposal. So for example, let's say automatic checking, if for whatever reason we get a check for a payment of a bill and there's no funds in that account, typically we would charge about $50 for that to the customer, but that cost is going to be reduced to $15. So there's not actually a set fee, but there's a breakdown of fees as it progresses through a monthly billing cycle. So that's what that fee proposal or that chart is in the package.
Okay. Anything else?
Annual savings of about $4,500 for the city.
Thank you.
I can keep going.
I try to get him to the good stuff, right?
I'm just trying to.
I try to get him to the good
There we
stuff. Thank you, sir. Is there a motion to approve 07?
I'll approve resolution 2023-032707.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
07 is passed. All right, number 08, Mr. Carey, is yours again.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I promise this is the last one for tonight. We received, so we have a primary and a secondary, which is a backup pump for our Spears Creek pump station. This is an important pump station for a sanitary sewer system. This essentially captures a little over 30% of probably the sewer for the northwest side of town. We had one of those, we had the backup pump go down, right? So now we're just left with one pump that runs essentially continuously. So that's an issue for us. We received 3 bids for a replacement pump, the low bid being $85,420. The second bid was $103,998, and then the third bid was $106,262.50. So just looking to get approval to accept the low bid and we get that pump ordered to be replaced. There's a pretty long delivery time for a pump that large. You're talking about a pump that's probably 7 feet tall. So they don't typically have these on the shelf. When you order them, they start to process and manufacture the pump. So they'll either do it in China or Germany or Switzerland or different places. So there's a long lead time, so we want to go ahead and get that out.
Thank you, sir. Anything else you want to share on that one?
The price being, the low bid being $85,420.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2023-032708.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the chair calls for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Mr. Carrier, I appreciate your playing around with me tonight, but we keep edging him on to do his reports real quick and expediently. But we don't want you to leave out the important stuff, especially the savings to the community, right? So-
Yeah, you're right. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you too, sir.
And the new good services that
Yeah,
we've
those
been needing
Yes.
for a long
That's right.
time. Thank
That's right.
you.
That's right. And let me do this too. I want to call out Bobby and Doris Trumbo, who have been attending tonight, and Gloria Lewis. They're real good friends of the mayor. But more importantly, they're just real good citizens of the town. I had invited them about the fact that we were bringing the Danville High School girls basketball team to our meeting tonight. And I think I said something, Mr. Trumbo, about the fact that we've been trying to harass him with basketball. I appreciate the time. Appreciate you all coming tonight. Okay? Is there anything else?
We don't have an executive session. He said hopefully.
We do or don't?
Session.
I heard don't.
Short.
Yeah, I was gonna have a heart attack. No executive session. What's wrong with you, man? Okay. Well,
Personnel.
Chair would entertain a motion for executive session based on personnel. Who's gonna take and do the honors? Executive session.
Aye.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor Commissioner. Staff is recommending the hiring of Connor Fair to the position of Parks and Rec Maintenance Supervisor.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, sir.
Staff is asking that you accept the resignation of Jacob Rui from the the position of police officer and Cameron Myers from the position of Parks and Rec Maintenance Worker.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
With regrets? All right, moved and second. All those in favor to accept those two resignations, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Chair would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.